Okay, time for another review, and this is In Broad Daylight. And uh, I'm this whole enterprise of I don't I don't really want to call these book reviews, just because that conjures up images of trolls on Amazon typing up negative 1-star reviews. I'd like to think of this as book reports, because I absolutely hated book reports as a child, and now this is kind of fun to go back through my library and find books that I've read years ago and revisit that experience. And especially some of the classics in my library that I go to, and the more dog-eared, the better the book, which this one is not, but this is from the true crime section of my library. This is based on a real case. This is In Broad Daylight, a Murder in Skidmore, Missouri, by Harry N. MacLean. Now, and if you just discovered some of my videos, because I've noticed a few folks subscribing, they're probably highly confused by the content on my channel. The whole point of these videos about my book collection is to ideally explain this to my children someday. I have 3 children that will someday inherit this broad spectrum of literature, and I hope they can use this to guide them through this, if for no other reason, so they can get fair market price when they go to resell these, or maybe they can learn something from it and reassemble some sections of my worldview. But alas, I digress. So this is In Broad Daylight, and this is about a murder in Missouri. And this took place, I believe, in 1981. This is about the murder of a town bully, for lack of a better way to put it, called, the guy's name was Ken McElroy. And this is an insane case to read. This is one of those that you know how it's going to end, because it's one of those stories. I remember when this happened, I remember my parents talking about it. I remember it was briefly a big news item. And I say briefly because I think it was one of those things that, because of the implications of this story got brushed aside and swept under the rug pretty quick, because of the broader implications of this for society. What happened, and again, I won't be ruining this for you. This is a true account of a murder in Missouri. And I won't be ruining it for you to tell you the outcome of this, because it's, again, historical record. And the whole point of the book is to explain what happened before. So almost in Pulp Fiction fashion, you kind of have to go back and understand it in a nonlinear fashion for it all to come together. So basically what happened was this guy, Ken McElroy, was the town bully in this small town of Skidmore, Missouri, and intimidated the locals, and just ran roughshod over everybody, even the state police. I don't think they had a proper local police department because it was such a small town, but it was the police that did get involved. In one case, he pulled a gun on the cop before the cop could pull his gun out, and threatened to kill him. So some of the stuff is really hard to believe until you realize this is all real historic record. And kind of my interest in this book is with all the other subjects I've covered about weird, esoteric criminal activity and that sort of thing. I found this interesting because even though it's kind of hinted at in this book, it doesn't really get into it. You can't help but wonder what kind of organized crime that McElroy might have been involved in. He bragged to some of his victims that he had connections in organized crime in Kansas City. And but some of the grand theft he got away with, some of the things you read about that he got away with, you think this guy had to have been very well connected to feel so confident as to basically throw all caution to the wind where his criminal activity was. He attempted murder. I think in one case he was brought up on murder charges or attempted murder charges, and was then acquitted because he intimidated some of the witnesses. Crazy story, but finally what happened was the locals all held a meeting in town, and when he came into town for his usual beer run at the local bar, a bunch of the locals came out into the street and wound up shooting him to death. And there was at least one or two shooters that gunned him down in broad daylight, hence the title, and pulled his girlfriend out of the car and shot him to death and left him there in the car, and everybody went just back to their business. And somebody called the police and eventually showed up and hauled him off. To this day, no one has admitted and no one has figured out who the town folk were who actually pulled the trigger and killed him. And basically everybody said, we didn't see nothing, and went back to their day-to-day lives. And as a result, there have never been any convictions. So it's one of those vigilante murder cases that is a great lesson in what happens when the police do not do their job, and when someone finally organized crime or just criminal behavior in general gets so out of hand that the local people go, okay, we've had enough, and they literally put him down like a wild animal in the street and just left him there to bleed out. Again, some of it sounds like something out of some Steven Seagal movie until you read up on it. And this is another one of those cases that's so insane, you'll find yourself pulling up your favorite search engine and looking into some of this stuff as you go along, because it is a crazy case. And there's only a couple of books on this, I've got both of them. There's this and Judgment Day. And Judgment Day, I think, takes a little bit more. It's been a while since I've read both of these. This one is a very flat telling of it, very much from the side of the town. Judgment Day, if I remember right, is more of it takes a little bit more of a judgmental perspective on the town folk, whereas his take is a little bit more, this dude had it coming, nobody was coming to the aid of the people in Skidmore. So anyway, fascinating book and fascinating lesson in what happens when a literal entire town is bullied to the point and it has exhausted all legal avenues and takes the law into their own hands. This is what you get. And I think especially relevant in light of a lot of the current events that are happening now, where you see a lot of that today, where there is a lot of obvious corruption in multiple levels of government that here in the United States that I think goes unchecked or has gone unchecked for a while. And I think if we're not careful, we're going to see this kind of action on a large scale if we are not careful. So anyway, In Broad Daylight by Harry N. MacLean, A Murder in Skidmore, Missouri. And I think this was published in 1988. I believe the murder occurred in summer of 81 and the book was written in 88. And anyway, very good, very fascinating story. Again, fairly dark. Just when you read what all the dude did, you'll be surprised that it went on as long as it did. But anyway, fascinating story and well worth running down. This is an easy book to find. I imagine most used bookstores would probably have this in the true crime section.